What if your next card wasn't made for an envelope but made to be displayed? Today, we are stepping out from our traditional A2 size cards, creating something truly special, a bold, high impact 5x7 bridge pop up that doubles as a beautiful home decor piece. This design gives our vibrant, hand colored botanicals plenty of space to shine and really come to life. And make sure you stick around till the very end because I'll walk you through how to build this oversized bridge so it stays nice and sturdy. And I'm also sharing my little secret for creating those soft, translucent dragonfly wings that add the perfect finishing touch. Let's get started. I'll be using some papers from the latest box by Your Paper Insider, and honestly, I'm really sad to see this company shut down. They have some absolutely gorgeous and unique papers. They'll be closing on May 1st, so you still have a little time to grab your favorites. Everything currently is at 50% off, which is such an amazing deal. So, if you've been wanting to try them out, now is definitely the time before they're gone for good. I also have an unboxing video where I walk you through everything from this new box number 15 and share some more details about each of those papers. I will leave that link in the description box below so you can check it out. We have some amazing sparkly papers, a fun rainbow of colors, solid color cardstocks, glitter papers, holographic cardstocks, and lots more. Your Paper Insider has always such a wide variety of collection, and I absolutely love each and every paper that is every time included in the boxes. Now, moving on to our card for today, or well, project for today. To create our large bridge pop-up card, I'm using or starting with this white cardstock panel. This again is by Your Paper Insider, and this one here measures 11 by 7 inches. Once we build our bridge, the final width won't be full 5 inches. It actually comes down slightly to about 4.5 inches. That means it'll still fit nicely inside a standard 5 by 7 envelope if you want to mail it out. Or you can do what I'm planning to do and gift it as a beautiful little decor piece for someone special. To create our bridge mechanism, we'll start by adding a few score lines to this panel, and this step is really what forms the structure of our pop-up. On one side of the panel, begin by scoring at 1 1/4 inches, then move over and score again at 2 1/4 inches, and finally at 3 1/4 inches. These three score lines will create the folds that allow our bridge to stand up and hold its shape from one side. Now, once you have those in place, go ahead and rotate your panel 180-degree. Using the exact same measurements, repeat the process on the other side as well. So again, score at 1 1/4, 2 1/4, and 3 1/4 inches. This ensures that both sides of the card are perfectly symmetrical, which is the key for a sturdy and balanced bridge pop-up design. Now, let's move on to folding along those score lines. We have a total of 6 score lines along the entire panel, and this is where the magic really starts to happen. I'm going to go ahead and fold along each of those lines, working back and forth to create a zigzag fold on both sides of the cardstock. This step is what truly brings the pop-up mechanism to life, so take your time here and make sure each fold is nice and crisp. You can use a bone folder or just your fingers, whatever feels comfortable, but I personally like using my bone folder to get those sharp, clean creases. Now, once you're done, you'll notice the pattern forming. It looks like a W or an M shape from the side. And when both the ends are folded into that zigzag structure, this is what you will have. You can already see how those raised sections start to create dimension, giving us the base for our bridge pop-up. At this point, believe it or not, the structure of the bridge card is actually complete. From here, the rest of the part is fun. It is all decorating. This is where you can really bring your card to life. Add your favorite pattern papers, incorporate stamped or stenciled backgrounds, layer in die cuts, and finish it off with a beautiful sentiment of your choice. For today's card, I'm reaching out for one of my absolute favorite sets, this gorgeous arched foliage design. It is such a stunning large scale image, but I've never really been able to use the entire thing on a standard card front. So I thought this 5 by 7 project would be perfect opportunity to finally let this entire piece shine. I went ahead and die cut the image using plain white cardstock. Then I placed that die cut piece onto my stamp platform and carefully aligned the large foliage stamp right over it. Using an ultra sticky mat really helps keep everything in place, especially when you're working with big images like this and when you plan on multiple stamping so that everything stays in place. Now, before stamping, I prepped the surface with some anti static powder and then stamped the image using some Versafine Onyx Black ink. Now, Versafine Onyx Black ink is a pigment ink, and I absolutely love to use that, especially when I am heat embossing on any surface. I did stamp this image a couple of times just to make sure that every detail was crisp and fully inked. Once I was happy with the coverage, I carefully peeled out the die cut piece and I added a layer of clear embossing powder over the entire image and heat set it. To prevent the paper from warping, I used my heat tool along with a holding surface to keep everything nice and flat. Here I will be using my Positively Everything tool that really helps preserve those clean, sharp lines on such a detailed image without any warping. I'm going to let this piece cool down completely before moving on to any kind of ink blending or coloring. This just helps everything set nicely and prevents any smudging. Now here's a quick side-by-side comparison of a heat embossed image versus one stamped with just regular dye ink. You can really see the difference. The heat embossing gives you that beautiful raised finish with crisp glossy shine, while the dye ink has softer, more matte look. Personally, I almost always prefer heat embossing for any image. There's just something about that clean, defined outline and subtle shine that really makes the details pop and elevates the overall look of the card. This set comes with coordinating stencils, which makes coloring super easy, but you absolutely don't have to use them. You could just as easily bring this image to life with your alcohol markers, color pencils, or even watercolors, depending on the look that you're going for. For my card, I decided to stick with the stencil coloring and went with a range of beautiful greens for the foliage. All the shades I'm using are from the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated Ink collection. I started with a lighter base using Field and then blended in Fairway to build up some depth. After that, I brought in a deeper shade, which is Pine, to add shadows and dimension, and finally finished it off with Aegean for those darker, richer areas. Layering those tones really helps give the foliage a more natural dimensional look without needing a lot of extra effort. Ink blending is such a simple technique, but it can create so much depth and dimension, especially when you stay within the same color family. The key is to work in layers, starting with your lightest shade. This first layer acts as your base and then helps map out the overall shape of your image. Don't worry about perfection here, just focus on getting that smooth and even coverage. Once that's done, you can start building dimension by gradually introducing slightly darker shades every time. I like to add those deeper tones towards the areas that would naturally fall into the shadow, just like the base of the leaf, or where they overlap, or even along the edges. Using a light hand and then building color slowly is really important here. It's much easier to deepen the color than to take it away. As you continue layering, you'll notice how the image starts to come to life. Those subtle shifts between the light, mid-tone, and the dark shades create a beautiful sense of depth, making your flat image look more dimensional and realistic. And a little tip here, go back in with your lightest color at the very end and softly blend over the transitions. This really helps smooth everything out and gives you that seamless, well blended finish. Isn't this piece absolutely gorgeous? I'm so happy with how it turned out. Now, before moving forward, I just wanted to make sure it fits nicely on our bridge, and yes, it does. It sits perfectly across the structure. Now there is a slight overhang on the sides, but I am totally okay with that. Since our base is about 4.5 inches wide, it still leaves plenty of room to fit inside a 5 by 7 envelope if you plan on mailing it. Or, like I'm doing, you can display it as a decor piece. It looks beautiful sitting on the desk or a shelf. Now, because only a few sections of this die cut piece will actually be adhered to the bridge, I wanted to make sure it's a bit more sturdy. So I went ahead and doubled it up by adding a second layer of the same die cut behind it. This gives it that extra strength and helps it hold its shape nicely once it's all in place. Adding that extra die cut layer doesn't just make the focal image more sturdy, it also gives it a subtle lift and dimension. That slight pop really enhances the overall look of the card, making everything feel more polished and giving your finished project a more professional and high end finish. I like to use liquid glue to adhere these pieces together because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room. That extra time really helps in making sure both the layers are perfectly aligned so they look completely seamless. With a large detailed image like this foliage, even a slightest misalignment can be noticeable. So, taking a moment to adjust everything before it sets makes a big difference in the final result. Now that our main focal point is almost ready, I wanted to pick out a background that would really complement it and sit beautifully on our bridge structure. I pulled out a few of my favorite papers from the box and did a little bit of side by side comparison. There were some really fun options. We had some soft grays, bright yellows, pretty pinks, and even a gorgeous sparkle cardstock. But in the end, I decided to go with the soft yellow. It just pairs so beautifully with the greens and the foliage and really helps the entire design feel bright, warm, and cohesive without overpowering our focal point. Choosing between the gray and the yellow was honestly a tough call. They both looked so good. But I'm really glad I went with the yellow in the end. It adds so much brightness and warmth to the design and really makes the final result feel fresh and vibrant. I've got three strips here that we'll be using to decorate our bridge structure. The main panel, which will go along the back, measures 6 3 by 4 by 4 1/4 inches. And then I have two smaller strips which will go on each of those side panels. Now each of those strip measures 6 3 by 4 by 1 inch. And these will go on the front section of our bridge. To add a bit more character to all three panels, I decided to bring in stencil number 3 from the set. It creates such a beautiful, subtle background, and I thought it worked perfectly for this project. You could absolutely use an embossing folder here as well, but since these panels are larger than your standard embossing folder, you just want to do some partial embossing to cover the entire surface and still get that lovely 3D texture. But using a stencil, especially one with an abstract design like this one, makes it so much more easier to cover a larger area even if the stencil itself is smaller than the panel. For color, I went with some warm brown tones, cappuccino and latte, to add a soft contrast against the yellow. It gives just enough depth and interest without taking away from the bright, cheerful background. Abstract stencils like these are such a great tool to have in your stash because they are incredibly versatile. Unlike detailed or image based stencils, these designs don't follow a specific pattern or subject. They are more about the texture, movement, and visual interest. What I love most about them is how forgiving they are. You don't have to worry about perfect placement or lining things up exactly. Even if your blending isn't completely even, it still looks intentional and artistic, which makes them perfect for both beginners and experienced crafters. They are also ideal for covering larger areas, especially when your panel is bigger than your stencil itself. You can easily move the stencil around, overlap sections, or even rotate it, and the design will still look seamless because of that organic nature. Another great thing is how well they work for layering. You can build depth by using multiple shades of the same color or even mix in different color families to add more bold and artistic look. And depending on how heavy or light-handed your ink blending is, you can create anything from a soft, subtle background to a more bold and textured effect. Overall, abstract stencils like these are perfect when you want to add interest and depth to your background Without competing with your focal point, they enhance your design while still letting the main elements shine. I love how beautiful that contrast looks. Well, another one of my favorite ways to add interest to the background is by using black watercolor splatters. It's such a simple technique, but it makes a huge impact. Black splatters add that perfect touch of contrast and help break up large areas of colors, especially when you're working with softer tones like yellows or any pastels. They instantly draw the eye in and give your card more artistic and finished look, especially working beautifully with this abstract background. I like to keep my splatters fairly controlled, not too heavy, just enough to add that bit of a texture without overpowering the design. You can do this by loading a small brush with that diluted black watercolor and gently tapping it to create fine droplets. It's one of those little finishing touches that adds so much personality and makes your background feel a lot more dynamic and complete. While the watercolor splatters are drying, I went ahead and die cut a few flowers to layer over our foliage. For this, I'm using two sets by Simon's Stamp, the Elegant Blossoms branch and the Tattered Daisies. I'm using the flower elements only from both these sets and skipping the branches and leaves since we are already having plenty of foliage in our main image. I cut all of these flowers using plain white cardstock because I knew I wanted to customize the colors. Now, box number 15 did include a darker shade of pink, which is absolutely beautiful, but I was really going for a softer, lighter pink for this design. Starting with a white cardstock gives you complete control over your color palette. You can build up the shades exactly the way you want, layer by layer, and create that perfect soft pink that complements the rest of the card beautifully. I placed each of those die cut florals onto my ultra sticky mat and then started adding color using some soft pinks. I began with a very light shade of pink, which is peony, and with a very gentle hand, I blended the color starting from the center of the flower and softly moving outward towards the petal. You'll notice I'm keeping most of the color concentrated in the center and the midsection while leaving the tips of the petals mostly white. This helps create a soft, airy look with that natural highlight. Next, I bought in a slightly darker shade, which is rose, and using a smaller ink blending brush, I added a bit more depth right at the center, pulling the color outward in a slight stroke towards the petal. Now, this layering really helps build dimension and gives the flowers a more realistic look. To finish them off, I added a pop of color to the centers using Sunbeam, which is a vibrant yellow. It adds just the right amount of contrast and really brings these florals to life. Next, I went ahead and adhered all the petals together, layering them to build these beautiful dimensional flowers. You could definitely add tiny pieces of foam tape between each of those layers if you want more lift and dimension, but for this design, I chose to keep things a bit more subtle. I used liquid glue and adhered all the layers flat, which still gives a lovely layered look without adding too much bulk. Once all that beautiful layering was done, I brought the flowers over to my foliage and started arranging them. Now, before adhering anything down, I like to take a moment to play around with the placement, moving the flowers here and there until I'm happy with how everything looks. This step really helps in creating a balanced composition and making sure no area feels too crowded or too empty. Only after I'm completely satisfied with the arrangement do I go in with liquid glue and adhere everything in place. Now that our main focal point is complete, we can start building our 3D bridge pop-up design. I'm going to begin by layering the background panels that we set aside to dry earlier. Starting with the back panel, I'm using liquid glue again. This just gives me a little wiggle room to position everything perfectly before it sets. You'll notice I left a thin white border around all those panels, which helps frame each of those sections and adds a clean finished look. But if you prefer a more edge to edge design, you can absolutely trim your panels to fit the exact size of the bridge sections and skip the border altogether. Next, I added a little liquid glue just along the edges of my foliage piece, being really careful with where that adhesive goes. I am only attaching it to the front panels and avoiding the center section completely. This is very important because we want the foliage to float over the bridge rather than being stuck flat against the back. Keeping that middle portion free helps maintain the dimension and really enhances the beautiful pop up effect. If you notice any small gaps while adhering your foliage, you can gently lift those areas and add a tiny bit more glue to secure everything properly. Just make sure that the piece is firmly attached to the bridge flap so it sits nice and stable. Now, with that, our main focal point is complete. Now it's time to add our sentiment. I decided to go with the Hugs sentiment from the same arched foliage set. I first stamped and heat embossed it in gold on white cardstock, but when I placed it on the bridge, it just didn't stand out the way I wanted it. So I switched things up and stamped it again with gold embossing powder, but this time on black cardstock. And that made all the difference. The black background really helps the sentiment pop against all those soft colors and details, adding a bold contrast that ties the whole design together beautifully. At this point, I felt that the design could use just a bit more gold, so I bought in the Whirl Dragonfly die. Now, I cut the wings using this gorgeous gold vellum from box number 15 and paired it with the dark navy blue body center. The combination of that soft shimmer with the deeper tone really helps the dragonfly stand out while still tying in beautifully with the rest of the design. Now, here's a fun little tip. Whenever you're creating a butterfly or dragonfly wings, try using any kind of shimmery vellum. It catches the light so beautifully and adds that subtle, elegant shine that can really elevate your entire project. I went ahead and adhered my little dragonfly right over one of those flowers, placing it diagonally opposite to where I plan on adding my sentiment. This kind of diagonal placement really helps create a nice visual balance across the design. It draws your eye from one element to the other and makes the overall composition feel more dynamic and cohesive. I added glue only to the body of the dragonfly and left the wings free. That way, they can lift up slightly, giving it a much more natural, delicate look with a bit of movement and dimension. And with that, our beautiful 5 by 7 bridge pop up card is complete. I absolutely love how this turned out, from that bold dimensional structure to the soft blended florals and those delicate little details that really bring everything to life. This design is such a fun way to step beyond the traditional card format and create something that can truly be displayed and enjoyed as a decor piece. It's dimensional, eye catching, and still folds flat into an envelope, and you also have place in the back of the card to write your personal message. I hope this inspires you to try out a bridge pop up design and play around with larger formats, layering, and texture. Don't forget, you can customize this with your favorite colors, stamps, and techniques to give it a completely new and different look. I'll have links to all the supplies I used listed in the description box below, along with links to the unboxing video for box number 15 and few other videos where I've created bridge pop-up cards in the past. So be sure to check those out for more inspiration. Please note that all the supply links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.